What if there was something that you could do that would literally cost probably less than $100 and would take less than 5 minutes of your time, but would have the potential to impact the course and trajectory of your life and potentially save your family and friends from some heartache and heartbreak? What I'm getting at is the coronary CT scan, which is a simple test to measure calcium in the arteries. And we'll dive into why this is important and helpful. What many people still fail to realize is that heart disease is the number one killer globally in the US and all countries combined. And it's really hard to say that you can escape this. The process of plugging up the arteries really begins at an early age and continues throughout life. We'll get into some strategies and tactics to deal with that, but the stats speak for themselves. The chance of surviving an out of the hospital cardiac arrest is very dismal when you're thinking about skilled responders versus unskilled responders versus events that happen in the hospital. Although having a defibrillator present and available early on makes a huge difference, the results still speak for themselves. And so the best course would really to be preventing this and being proactive about it. A few definitions, and I don't want to belabor the semantics of this. Atherosclerosis, coronary heart disease, coronary artery disease, MI, heart attack, stroke. These are all synonymous with an underlying process where a glue-like substance, or gruel if you will go and plug up the blood vessels that distribute blood to the heart, the brain, and the vital organs. There's also a process that goes along with this called atherosclerosis, which is actually hardening of the arteries. The arteries and the blood vessels are very dynamic. They're not just like a garden hose. They really stretch and expand depending on exercise and blood pressure and physical demands that a person puts on the body from day-to-day living and activity and exercise. This is an evolving process. There are several different things that can happen, and the blood vessels can become progressively narrow because of the goo building up and limiting blood flow. It forms what's called a plaque. It's basically a booger, if you will, in the blood vessel, and this can rupture. And when that does, it can suddenly block the blood vessel, causing a heart attack or stroke, or it can rupture or crack. And there's a variety of things that the body does to try to repair that, and that can generate some blood flow limitations, cause a heart attack and stroke, and obviously is very detrimental as well. So why do you care? Why should you care about this? You're not new to this, most likely. Your doctor's talked about this. You know somebody in your life that's had heart problems, a heart attack, or maybe even died from a heart attack. Maybe it was Uncle John or your Aunt Sally or your grandma. But the reality is that people are living longer, and just because we're living longer doesn't necessarily mean that we're healthier. I think a key concept, at least in my mind, is that many of my patients, friends, and family want to live into their advanced years but remain productive and functional. It's not just a matter of being old, it's a matter of being healthy and having a healthy lifespan and being functional, not disabled where you're just sitting around in a rocker waiting for the lights to go out. So let's dive into the coronary CT scan. It's a very simple test. It's a scoring system that's used to measure the levels of calcium that are detected in the blood vessels surrounding the heart. The score typically ranges from 0 to over 400. A score of 0 means that there's no calcium. It doesn't mean that there's no disease, no glue or problem. It just means that the risk is significantly less than, say, for somebody who's got a score that's 200, 300, or 400, which would signify a very severe calcium buildup, which is a marker which we'll get to in just a second. It really shows that there's already been damage. So if a physician is seeing calcium on your scan, it means that the blood vessel has already been damaged and the body has gone in and tried to repair that damage. The key point here is that it doesn't find everything. Calcium is what shows up. And so if it's not calcified, if it's just a little bit of goo, that doesn't show up. So a person could have a bunch of goo that hasn't caused the need for a repair process, and there's no calcium there. It doesn't mean that they don't have any risk at all of having a heart attack. It just is a surrogate marker, if you will. So the key point is that it doesn't show everything. And I'm going to share my story in a minute about how, even though it may not show everything related to blockage of the arteries, it can show other things that can dramatically alter the course of a person's life. It's really the unstable plaques, the unstable goo, that's really quite risky. And just because a person's score is 0 or 10 or 50, it doesn't mean that they don't have risk. These little plaques, as I mentioned earlier, can bust open and cause an inflammatory cascade inside the blood vessels inside the body, which can trigger a heart attack. Another common question and concern I get from my patients is, well, I don't want to go on a CT scan. It's like being in a coffin. Having been inside CTs and MRIs for a variety of reasons over the course of my life, there is a clear difference in the size. Just think of a CT scan as a thin donut. And the other point is, typically when these heart scans are done, the person's going in feet first. So in essence, the head doesn't even enter the machine. For the most part, unless a person's extremely short in stature, they might have their head underlying part of the machine. But MRI is much longer and much narrower and more confining. But fortunately, newer MRIs, there's more space, and the technicians do a great job at trying to make it more comfortable and less claustrophobic for the patient. Another point to hammer home here is future pacing. I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes get stuck in the now. How you feel now, what are you doing now, and ignoring what's going to happen in the next 10 years. It's the foundation that's laid today that's really going to have the biggest impact and predictable power of how things are going to function in 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years and beyond. So back to the score, a 0 is excellent, awesome, but it doesn't mean that you're done. I hear this all the time. Patients will say, I had a CAT scan or I had a stress test 5 years ago. I'm fine. The body is dynamic. Things change, lifestyle, stress, sleep, hormones, all those things change. Illnesses can crop up, and there is a lifespan of tests, and it's a little difficult to come down with a concrete number. Several cardiology mentors over the years have told me that these scans and these tests have probably a lifespan of about a year, and so take that to heart. Be proactive about your health. My story, if you haven't heard it before, is I went in for a coronary CT scan. I had some friends that had some heart issues while we were training for triathlons. I used to smoke cigars. My cholesterol is a little borderline, so I thought I'll get a scan, see where I'm at. Fortunately, my score was 0, which relieved me. But 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the overreading cardiologist who found an aneurysm in my chest, which needed to have prompt surgical repair. Which, had I not had that scan and found the aneurysm, I most likely would have died for the upcoming race that I was training for, because when the surgeon went in to take out part of my aorta and replace it with a graft, he already found that the wall was breaking down and part of the wall had necrosed, which is just a medical word for death. And so it was in the process of already beginning the cascade, which would have killed me essentially. So there are modifications. You know these are not new, but I want to bring out Einstein's definition. It's basically, in a simple way, when a person continues to do the same things even though they are hoping for a different result. That's the definition of insanity. Many people are going to ignore sleep. They continue to smoke despite having prior heart attacks, or maybe having a scan like this and their number is bad, 300-400. Ignoring all the things that you know about dietary choices, exercise, trying to keep body weight down, managing insulin. And insulin's an interesting beast. It's more than just diabetes. It's really before diabetes. There's a whole cascade of things that happens as a person becomes intolerant to glucose. Their insulin levels are abnormal. Their blood sugars slowly rise. They're labeled pre-diabetic by their doctor. Then they're diabetic. They're on a pill and nothing changes. And then a few years later, they find themselves on more pills and insulin. And it is completely possible to disrupt this. If you're working with a practitioner, a doctor who is skilled in this, you can essentially interrupt the pattern and prevent this from being a life-changing disease. As alluded to earlier, it all comes down to health span versus lifespan. You want to grow old and be functional, productive, and happy and enjoy life, or would you rather have something else at an earlier age? In that light, I've created a completely free course. It's on Udemy. It's called Healing the Heart. It just chronicles my journey through discovery, surgery, recovering in the hospital, recuperating after major open heart surgery, and getting back on track with exercise, training, running, etc. Totally free. If you find value in that, I would love if you'd share it and share a review. It just helps the course be found. I hope you found some value in this presentation, as you know, your children, your family, your friends, they will clearly thank you for being proactive about your health and taking the steps necessary to strive for a healthy lifespan, longevity, productivity, and happiness. If you want to nerd out, there are some references here. I know it's kind of small on the video. You can message me. I can send these to you if you like. And I hope you found some value here. As always, have a fantastic week. Be safe, be well, take care.